And of course, just in a few minutes, we will go to our correspondent Eric Ham there to actually talk to us about this whole voting rights. Of course, there's a controversy there at Congress, but of course, a bill aimed at thwarting restrictive new voting laws enacted in Republican-led states failed to advance in the US Senate as the Republican lawmakers blocked a Democratic effort to begin debating the measure. Well, Eric Ham is already standing by right now. Let's have him so we can have this conversation. Eric, thank you so much for joining me. Eric is in Washington. Eric, thank you so much. And of course, we've just seen the president there really speak on voting rights, even though he was there to talk about the 10th anniversary of Martin Luther King's memorial. You know, looking at the whole, first of all, let's understand this voting rights issue. Let's talk about what these voting rights are and why it's so controversial to the point that we're having issues in Congress. Eric?
Well, the reason why it's such a major issue right now is because after the 2020 election, we saw more than 400 bills introduced around the country restricting the right to vote. Now, the right to vote has become an issue. It's been an issue all throughout history, particularly for people of color in the United States. And the Voting Rights Act of 1963 was passed to ensure that all Americans had equal access to the polls. And what we have seen were some of the most restrictive voting laws implemented since Jim Crow, an era that saw separate equate as equal in this country. And now what we're seeing is Congress is attempting to try to pass voting rights legislation in an effort to try to thwart many of these bills and much of the laws that have been implemented at the state and local level. Just to give an example of how these bills play out, let's take the state of Georgia, which is seen as having one of the most restrictive. This is a state that now has implemented a law that actually makes it illegal to bring food or water to anyone in line who is waiting to vote. Think about that. It would actually be illegal, which means you can be arrested for bringing water or food to someone who is in line already waiting to vote. These are some of the laws that are now in place, making it more difficult for people to actually go to the polls and vote. And now what we're seeing is Congress, particularly led by Democrats, are attempting to try to undo what's taking place at the local and state level by passing national legislation that will usurp the laws currently on the books in many of these states.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for that brief history right there. Quite scary looking at the fact that we are in the 21st century and we're still looking at this kind of restrictive laws, you know, when it concerns voting in a country like the United States. But let's look at the fact that Republicans have now blocked it from being brought up for debate. So what happens next?
Well, as long as Democrats are unable to amend the filibuster, and the reason the filibuster has not been amended is because there are some Democrats who refuse to amend it. Now, when we say amend the filibuster, in order to pass anything in the U.S. Senate, you need 60 votes. And 60 votes will actually stave off a filibuster. A filibuster is basically a procedure in the Senate that allows for ending debate or not allowing legislation to come up for a debate and then subsequently a vote. And quite frankly, the filibuster is something that historically has been used to block civil rights legislation from passing. And so now what we're seeing is members of the Democratic Party are unwilling to actually change that law because or that rule, and they can actually amend those rules on a party line vote because those are rules to the Senate. In fact, it's something that has been done particularly as it relates to Supreme Court justices getting an up or down vote. But now, in order for this legislation to actually get to the president's desk, it is going to require Democratic senators to actually amend their own procedures to allow this to happen. But right now, we do know that there are several led by Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kristen Sinema of Arizona who refuse to bring these issues up for a debate in the Senate to amend the rule.
Right, well, we'll see how that plays out, really. But let's stay with the Congress, really, and talk about the fact that the House is currently now voting on Bannon's contempt of Congress. We want to get the latest on that, and also marry that with the latest when it concerns the negotiations on the president's infrastructure bill. I hear that an agreement might be reached towards the end of the week. Talk to us about that, Eric.
Yeah, first, let's talk about Steve Bannon. Congress is actually going to take this up later today. It's going to be a vote before the full House to send a criminal contempt to the Department of Justice. This already came out of the January 6th Select Committee to actually bring this issue up to the House for a full vote. It was unanimously voted in the committee that Steve Bannon should be charged with contempt of Congress for refusing to adhere to the subpoena submitted by Congress. That is expected to pass, and a recommendation for criminal contempt is expected to go to the Department of Justice. The Attorney General himself, Merrick Garland, will likely weigh in on this matter. And what we are now learning is that the January 6th Select Committee believes that Steve Bannon is a key and crucial figure in the events that took place on January 6th. Now, moving on to the Biden's Build Back Better agenda, you're right. It does appear as though they're getting closer and closer to an agreement. However, we still do not know if Kristen Sinema, the moderate Democratic senator from Arizona, will go along with some of the change proposals in this new bill. Remember, this bill started out at $6 trillion. It was cut down to $3.5 trillion, and now it's looking like it's going to come in at around $1.75 to $1.9 trillion. The issue of expansion for Medicare to be able to negotiate drug prices, that is still in the legislation, and that was seen as a red line for Senator Sinema. So that is one issue that they're going to have to address very quickly. President Biden desperately wants to get this done before he heads off to Glasgow for the UN Global Climate Summit, because, of course, there is language in this bill that will address climate change.
Right. Well, Eric, like you have said, the president's bill has seen a lot of cut down in terms of the amount that he was proposing, really, for this infrastructural bill. But do you envisage, like a lot of people are predicting, that a deal might be struck, hopefully, before the president heads off to Scotland? Do you think this will happen, Eric?
We don't know at this time. We do know that negotiations are going. Joe Manchin is speaking, and it appears as though he and Bernie Sanders are coming to an agreement. What that means, Kristen Sinema at this point is still seen as the wild card, so it's anyone's guess what will happen.
Right. Eric Ham, for your in-depth analysis tonight, I say thank you so much. Eric Ham there in Washington for us.